The first time I entered the Blackwood estate, I felt like I was walking into the jaws of something far bigger than myself. Thunder rolled across the sky as I stepped out of the taxi, my second-hand dress already soaked through from the short walk up the cobblestone driveway. The mansion loomed above me, all harsh angles and dark windows, a modern fortress disguised as a luxury home. Mrs. Petrovich, the head housekeeper, had made it clear during my interview that this was more than a job, it was a lifeline. "You need this more than we need you," she'd said, her eyes flicking over my worn shoes and desperate expression. "Remember that." And she was right. With rent 3 months overdue and the eviction notice already taped to my door, I couldn't afford to be picky. Sophia Reeves? A man in a tailored suit appeared from nowhere, his face expressionless as he assessed me from behind sleek sunglasses. Despite the pouring rain, not a drop touched him beneath the massive black umbrella he held. "Follow me." The foyer echoed with my wet footsteps, each one leaving embarrassing imprints on the pristine marble. I clutched my small bag of belongings closer, hyper-aware of the security cameras tracking my movement and the men in dark suits positioned at strategic points throughout the house. Mrs. Petrovich had warned me, this wasn't just any wealthy family. This was the home of Alexei Volkov, and his name alone had made the blood drain from my face during the interview. Everyone in the city knew of the Volkovs. Their legitimate businesses, real estate, nightclubs, restaurants, were just the shiny veneer covering something much darker. There were whispers of trafficking, extortion, and violence that trailed the family name like a shadow. But desperation makes cowards of us all. And I told myself I would just clean the floors, wash the linens, and keep my head down. I wouldn't see anything I shouldn't. I wouldn't hear anything I shouldn't. Mrs. Petrovich appeared at the top of the grand staircase, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun. "You're late," she said, though I was exactly on time, "and you're dripping all over the floor." "I'm sorry," I murmured, my voice smaller than I intended. "You'll be assigned to the East Wing," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Mr. Volkov's private quarters. You'll clean when he's not present. If he returns while you're working, you leave immediately. No eye contact, no speaking unless spoken to. Understood?" I nodded, though my stomach twisted at the thought of being in the same space as the infamous Alexei Volkov, even with him absent. "Your uniform is in your quarters. You start in 30 minutes. My quarters turned out to be a small but clean room in the staff wing, with a twin bed, dresser, and window overlooking the extensive gardens. The walls were a pristine white, the bedding crisp and new. It was nicer than anywhere I'd lived in the past 2 years, which said more about my circumstances than the room itself. The uniform was simple, a charcoal gray dress with a white collar. Practical but fitted. As I slipped it on, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Pale skin, dark circles under hazel eyes, chestnut hair pulled back into a practical bun. I looked exactly like what I was. Invisible. The perfect quality for a maid in a house where seeing too much could be dangerous. The East Wing was eerily quiet as Mrs. Petrovich showed me through it, pointing out the rooms I would be responsible for. "Mr. Volkov's office is strictly off-limits," she said, gesturing to a heavy oak door, "as is his bedroom when he's occupying it. The rest, the sitting room, bathroom, kitchen, and hallways, are your domain." "How will I know when he's here?" I asked. She gave me a look that suggested the question was absurdly naive. "You'll know. For 3 weeks, I became a ghost in that house. I learned the rhythms of the estate, which hours were safest to clean the East Wing, which staff members were kind, and which would report the slightest mistake to Mrs. Petrovich. I made beds that looked barely slept in, cleaned bathrooms with products that cost more than my weekly salary, and dusted shelves of books that appeared untouched. I never saw him. Sometimes there would be evidence of his presence, a coffee cup with the faint imprint of lips, a towel carelessly discarded on a bathroom floor, a jacket thrown over a chair that still carried the scent of expensive cologne, and something darker, like smoke or gunpowder. But Alexei Volkov himself remained a ghost, a name that caused the staff to straighten their spines and lower their voices whenever mentioned. Until that rainy Tuesday, exactly 24 days after I started. I was changing the sheets in one of the guest rooms of the East Wing, my mind drifting as my hands performed the familiar task. The thunder outside had been building all afternoon, and the old windows rattled with each boom. I was so distracted by the storm that I didn't notice the change in the air, the sudden stillness that fell over the house like a blanket. I heard the voices first, low, male, speaking in rapid Russian that I couldn't understand. Then footsteps, multiple sets, moving with purpose through the hallway outside. I froze, sheet half-tucked, as realization washed over me. He was home, and I was exactly where I shouldn't be. Gathering the dirty linens in my arms, I moved quickly toward the door, intending to slip out and disappear down the service stairwell before I was noticed. I turned the handle as quietly as possible and peered out into the hallway, and there he was. Alexei Volkov stood less than 10 feet away, his back to me as he spoke to 3 men in suits. Even from behind, he commanded the space in a way that made the air feel thin, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair cut precisely at the nape of his neck. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my year's salary, the fabric moving like liquid shadow as he gestured with one hand. The other hand rested casually in his pocket. But there was nothing casual about the way the men around him stood, alert, deferential, as if ready to move at his slightest command. I tried to step back into the room to close the door before I was seen. But my elbow caught the edge of the doorframe, sending one of the folded towels in my arms tumbling to the floor with a soft thud. The conversation stopped. All 4 men turned, but I only saw one. Alexei Volkov's eyes locked on mine, and everything I'd heard about him suddenly seemed both completely true and woefully inadequate. He couldn't have been more than 35, with features that belonged on a Renaissance painting, high cheekbones, a straight nose, and lips that might have been sensual if they weren't pressed into a hard line. But it was his eyes that rooted me to the spot. Gray, like the storm outside, and just as merciless. For 1 heartbeat, 2, we stared at each other. Me, clutching dirty sheets to my chest like a shield. Him, something unreadable flickering across his expression before it settled back into cold assessment. I'm sorry, sir, I managed, my voice barely audible. I was just finishing up. He said something in Russian to the men without taking his eyes off me. They nodded and moved away, disappearing around a corner. Then he stepped toward me, and it took everything I had not to back away. "You're new," he said. His voice was deep, accented but perfect English, with the kind of authority that suggested he rarely needed to raise it to be obeyed. "Yes, sir. 3 weeks now. I know who you are, Sophia Reeves." The sound of my name in his mouth felt invasive somehow, like he'd reached out and touched me without permission. "Mrs. Petrovich has informed me of all new staff." He took another step closer, and I caught his scent. Expensive cologne layered over something earthy and distinctly male. Despite the cool air, heat rushed to my face. "You shouldn't be in this wing now," he continued. There was no anger in his voice, just statement of fact, which somehow made it worse. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you'd returned. I was just changing the, now you know." His eyes traveled over my face, down to my collar, and back up again. Not sexual, but assessing. Like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve in the most efficient way possible. "I have some associates arriving this evening. Make sure the guest rooms in the West Wing are prepared." "Yes, sir." I clutched the linens tighter, painfully aware of how small I felt in his presence. He nodded once, dismissing me, and turned away. I took the opportunity to hurry past him, keeping my eyes on the floor. But as I passed, his voice stopped me again. "Sophia." I turned, my heart hammering against my ribs. "The blue vase in the sitting room. Be careful when you dust it. It's Tang Dynasty. Worth more than you'll earn in your lifetime." I swallowed hard. "I'll be careful, sir." Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes, there and gone in an instant. "I'm sure you will." That night I couldn't sleep. The brief encounter replayed in my mind, each detail magnified by the darkness of my room. The way he'd looked at me, not with desire or even interest, but with the cool assessment of a man who measured everything in terms of use and value. It made me feel exposed in a way that had nothing to do with my body and everything to do with my soul. In the staff dining room the next morning, I picked at my toast while Elena, one of the kitchen maids, chattered excitedly beside me. "They say one of them is a senator's son," she whispered. And the other is some tech billionaire. Mr. Volkov only entertains the most powerful people. Why would a senator's son be visiting a known criminal? I asked without thinking. The table went silent. Elena's eyes widened, and Mrs. Petrovich, who had been passing by with her coffee, stopped cold. "We do not discuss Mr. Volkov's business or his guests," she said, her voice like ice. "Ever." "I'm sorry," I murmured, cheeks burning. "I didn't mean—" "Your assignment today is the library in the main house," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "All of those books need to be removed, dusted, and replaced exactly as they were. I expect it to take you all day." It was a punishment, and we all knew it. The library contained thousands of volumes, many of them ancient and delicate. Normally, it would be a task shared by at least 2 maids. I nodded, accepting my fate. The library, at least, was in the main house, far from the east wing and any chance of encountering Alexei Volkov again. I worked methodically through the morning, carefully removing each book, wiping it down, and returning it to its exact position. By noon, my back ached and my fingers were coated in a fine layer of dust, but I'd only completed 2 shelves. I was balanced on a ladder, reaching for a particularly heavy tome near the top shelf, when the library door opened. Expecting Mrs. Petrovich checking on my progress, I didn't bother to look down. "I'm about a quarter of the way through," I called. "The oldest ones are taking extra time because of the fragile bindings." "Fascinating." The deep, accented voice sent a shock through my system. My hand jerked, knocking the heavy book from its place. It tumbled down, and I made a desperate grab for it, overbalancing in the process. The ladder teetered, and suddenly I was falling, a scream trapped in my throat. I never hit the ground. Strong arms caught me, the impact driving a grunt from my rescuer but holding firm. For a bewildering moment, I was cradled against a hard chest, the scent of that familiar cologne flooding my senses. Alexei Volkov set me on my feet, but didn't immediately step away. His hands remained on my waist, steadying me as I found my balance. This close, I could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low. I shook my head, unable to form words with him so close. His gaze moved over my face, lingering on my parted lips before returning to my eyes. "You should be more careful, Sophia." The way he said my name made it sound like something precious and dangerous at the same time. This house has survived for generations without incident. I'd hate for that record to be broken by a careless maid. The rebuke snapped me back to reality. I stepped away from his touch, smoothing down my uniform with trembling hands. "I'm sorry about the book, sir. It's not damaged." He glanced at the volume that had fallen to the carpet. Machiavelli's The Prince. Appropriate. I bent to retrieve it, grateful for the chance to break eye contact. When I straightened, he was watching me with that same unreadable expression. "You're new to this kind of work," he said. It wasn't a question. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir." "What did you do before?" The question surprised me. Wealthy employers rarely showed interest in their staff's backgrounds, beyond ensuring they weren't criminals or spies. "I was a nursing student," I admitted, "but I had to leave the program." "Why?" I looked away, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Financial reasons." He made a sound that might have been understanding or dismissal. "And now you dust my books." "Yes, sir." He took a step closer, and I had to force myself not to back away. "Tell me, Sophia, do you always follow orders so obediently?" Something in his tone made my skin prickle with awareness. There was a current beneath the words, a test being administered that I didn't understand. I chose my response carefully. "I try to do my job well, sir." His lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile. A diplomatic answer. He reached past me to return the Machiavelli to its place on the shelf, his arm brushing mine in the process. The contact, brief as it was, sent a jolt through me. "Continue with your work," he said, stepping back. "But perhaps use the smaller ladder for the highest shelves. I might not be here to catch you next time." With that, he turned and left the library, leaving me staring after him with my heart racing, and a strange feeling that something significant had just shifted between us. Something I didn't understand and wasn't sure I wanted to. What I didn't know then, as I climbed back up the ladder with shaking hands, was that Alexei Volkov had already decided I belonged to him. I just hadn't realized it yet. The incident in the library changed something, though I couldn't immediately identify what. I continued my daily routines, cleaning, polishing, dusting the endless surfaces of the Blackwood estate. But I could feel eyes on me constantly, not just the security cameras that tracked movement throughout the mansion, but human eyes, watchful and assessing. 2 days after Alexei had caught me in his arms, Mrs. Petrovich reassigned me back to the East Wing. "Mr. Volkov has specifically requested you maintain his quarters," she said, her tone suggesting she found this both suspicious and irritating. "Do not disappoint him." The warning was unnecessary. Disappointing Alexei Volkov seemed like a dangerous proposition, one I had no intention of testing, so I threw myself into my work with renewed dedication, ensuring his spaces were immaculate. I learned his habits from the evidence he left behind. The books moved slightly on his nightstand suggested he read late into the night. The barely touched plates indicated he ate sparingly when alone. The worn path in the carpet before the windows revealed he spent hours staring out at the grounds, perhaps deep in thought. A week passed without another encounter. Then 2. I began to relax, thinking perhaps I had imagined the significance of our interaction. Maybe his request for me to clean his quarters was nothing more than satisfaction with my work. I was good at what I did, after all. Thorough, careful, and discreet. Then came the night that changed everything. It was past midnight, and I shouldn't have been in the East Wing at all. But I'd noticed a water stain forming on the ceiling of the sitting room that afternoon. A small thing, but potentially damaging if left unaddressed. With Alexei away at one of his clubs downtown, according to the staff gossip, I decided to place buckets under the spot and make a note for maintenance. Better to prevent a larger problem, I reasoned. The house was silent as I made my way through the darkened halls, carrying a metal bucket and towels. The night security knew me by now and nodded as I passed, accepting my explanation without question. I entered the East Wing cautiously, still feeling like an intruder, despite having cleaned these rooms daily for weeks. The sitting room was bathed in moonlight, giving the elegant furniture an ethereal quality. I located the water stain on the ceiling, it had grown since the afternoon, and positioned the bucket beneath it. As I straightened, a sound from the adjoining room froze me in place. Alexei's bedroom door opening. He emerged like a shadow given form, dressed only in black pants, his chest bare and gleaming in the moonlight. I hadn't heard him return. He hadn't turned on any lights, and now he stood between me and the exit, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "Sir," I gasped, "I'm sorry. There's a leak. I didn't know you were home." He moved toward me with the fluid grace of a predator, each step deliberate. And yet, here you are, in my private rooms. After hours, my pulse hammered in my throat. The ceiling... I pointed upward, words failing me as he drew closer. I was afraid the water might damage the furnishings. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could see his face clearly now. His hair was damp, as if he'd recently showered, and a thin scar I hadn't noticed before traced his left collarbone. He studied me for a long moment, then glanced up at the ceiling where a drop of water fell into the bucket with a metallic ping. "Diligent," he murmured, then his eyes returned to mine. "Or perhaps curious. I'm just doing my job, sir. At midnight? In the dark?" His voice held no anger, only a dangerous sort of amusement. "That's dedication beyond what I pay for, Sophia." The way he said my name, soft, almost like a caress, made heat curl in my stomach. I clutched the towels tighter against my chest. "I should go." "Not yet." He gestured to a nearby chair. "Sit." It wasn't a request. I perched on the edge of the chair, hyper-aware of my uniform, practical for day work, but suddenly feeling too thin, too revealing in the intimate darkness. Alexei walked to a cabinet and removed 2 glasses, pouring an amber liquid into each. He brought one to me, his fingers brushing mine as he handed it over. "Drink," he said, taking the seat opposite me. The coffee table between us seemed an inadequate barrier. I sipped the liquid, expensive whiskey that burned a path down my throat. "Thank you." He watched me over the rim of his own glass, eyes reflecting the moonlight. Tell me why you're really here, Sophia. I told you, the water leak. Could have waited until morning. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The truth. Something in his gaze made lies impossible. I'm not sure, I admitted. I saw the leak and felt responsible. Responsible, he repeated, as if tasting the word. For my home, my possessions. I looked down at my glass. It's my job to take care of things. Things, he echoed, a faint smile playing at his lips. Is that how you see yourself? Taking care of things? The question caught me off guard. I don't understand. I think you do. He finished his whiskey and set the glass aside. You move through this house like a ghost, Sophia. Watching, listening, learning the rhythms and secrets of everyone who lives here. His eyes never left mine, including me. My heart stuttered. No, You know when I sleep and when I rise, what I eat, what I read. His voice remained soft, almost gentle, but I felt the danger beneath. You know more about my daily habits than some of my closest associates. I swallowed hard. I'm just observant. It helps me do my job better. Indeed. He stood in one fluid motion and moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit gardens. And what have you observed about me, I wonder? The question felt like a trap. I chose my words carefully, that you're a man who values privacy. Order, control. He turned to look at me over his shoulder, something like approval in his expression. Go on. Emboldened by his reaction, and perhaps the whiskey, I continued. You read history and philosophy, but you prefer the classics to modern interpretations. You drink coffee black in the morning, but take tea with honey when you work late. You speak at least 4 languages fluently: Russian, English, Italian, and something Eastern. Chinese, maybe. He raised an eyebrow. Mandarin, for business purposes. You sleep on the right side of the bed, even though you're alone. I regretted the observation immediately, heat rushing to my face. But Alexei merely smiled, a real one this time that transformed his severe features into something devastatingly handsome. Very observant indeed. He crossed back to me and took the empty glass from my hand, setting it aside. Then, to my shock, he knelt before me, bringing us eye to eye. Up close, I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw. He smelled of sandalwood and clean skin. And what else have you observed, Sophia? His voice had dropped to a near whisper. About how I look at you, perhaps? My breath caught. I don't... You do. He reached up, one finger hovering near my cheek but not quite touching. You feel it. The way the air changes when we're in the same room. I couldn't deny it. The electric awareness that hummed between us, that had been there from our first encounter. But I also couldn't admit to it, couldn't cross that line. Mr. Volkov, Alexei, he corrected, when we're alone. This is inappropriate, I whispered, even as I remained frozen in place, unable to pull away from his gravitational pull. Is it? He finally made contact, his fingertip tracing the line of my jaw with feather-light pressure. Tell me to stop then. The words wouldn't come. I sat trembling as his finger continued its path down my neck to the hollow of my throat, where my pulse hammered visibly. Your body doesn't want me to stop, he observed, his eyes following the path of his finger. But your mind is afraid, not of me, I think, but of what I represent. And what's that? I managed to ask. Power, he said simply. Control, things you've never had. His hand dropped away, and he stood once more, putting distance between us. Things you might find you enjoy, given the chance. The abrupt shift left me reeling. I rose on unsteady legs. I should go. He nodded, his expression unreadable once more. Yes, it's late, and you start work early. I moved toward the door, half expecting him to stop me, but he remained where he was, watching. At the threshold, I paused. The maintenance staff. I'll tell them about the leak in the morning. Don't bother. I'll have someone look at it. He picked up our empty glasses. Good night, Sophia. Good night, Alexei, I whispered, testing his name. Something flashed in his eyes, satisfaction perhaps, before I slipped out the door and hurried back to my room, my skin still tingling where he'd touched me. The next morning, I convinced myself I had dreamed the entire encounter. It seemed too intimate, too strange to have actually happened. But when I arrived to clean the east wing, the bucket was gone from the sitting room, and a maintenance worker was already repairing the ceiling, and on the coffee table sat a single glass with a fingerprint on the rim. Mine. Days passed in a heightened state of awareness. I continued my duties, but now I felt Alexei's presence everywhere, even when he wasn't physically there. Twice more I encountered him unexpectedly, once in the hallway, where he stopped me to ask about a missing cufflink, which I found later that day, trapped between the cushions of a chair, and once in the kitchen late at night, where I'd gone for a glass of water and found him doing the same. Each time, the air between us crackled with unspoken tension, but he maintained a careful distance, never crossing the line he'd approached that night in his sitting room. "You look tired," Elena commented one morning as we ate breakfast in the staff dining room. "Are you sleeping okay?" I wasn't. My dreams were filled with gray eyes and gentle fingers tracing my skin, but I just shrugged. "The spring cleaning schedule is brutal. Mrs. Petrovich has us rotating through the guest rooms." Elena nodded sympathetically. "At least you'll be too busy for the party tomorrow night." "Party? You haven't heard? Mr. Volkov is hosting some big event. Business associates from all over the country, apparently. Very exclusive." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Rumor is there'll be politicians, celebrities, even a European prince or two. All the regular household staff get the night off. They're bringing in professionals for the event." My curiosity piqued. "All of us get the night off?" "Not exactly." Elena looked smug. "Some of us have been asked to help with coat check and other non-food service. The pay is triple our normal rate." "Oh." I tried to hide my disappointment. "That's great for you." Elena's expression softened. "Hey, don't worry. You've only been here a few months. These opportunities come with seniority." I nodded, but something about the conversation left me feeling hollow. It was ridiculous to feel excluded from an event I hadn't even known about until now, yet I did. More concerning was the realization that I wanted to be there, wanted another glimpse into Alexei's world, another chance to feel that electric connection that both terrified and thrilled me. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Petrovich summoned me to her office. She sat behind her desk, ramrod straight as always, a folder open before her. "Your performance reviews have been satisfactory," she said without preamble. "You're thorough, punctual, and you don't gossip with the other staff." "Thank you," I said, uncertain why this warranted a special meeting. She closed the folder. "Mr. Volkov has requested you work tomorrow evening's event." Shock rendered me momentarily speechless. "Me? But I've never worked an event before." "I'm aware." Her tone suggested she found this as baffling as I did. Nevertheless, he was specific. "You'll be assigned to the coat room with Elena and Marcus. Wear the formal uniform, black dress, white collar. Report to the main foyer at 7 p.m. sharp." I nodded, trying to contain the flutter of excitement in my stomach. "Yes, ma'am." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Sophia, a word of advice. Mr. Volkov's attention can be flattering, but it is rarely without purpose or consequence. Remember your position in this household." The warning was clear. Don't get ideas above your station. "I understand," I said quietly. She dismissed me with a nod, but her words followed me through the rest of the day, a shadow on my unexpected anticipation for the party. The night of the event arrived with a flurry of activity. The mansion transformed before my eyes. Flowers appeared in every room, crystal chandeliers sparkled with extra polish, and the air filled with the sense of expensive food being prepared in the kitchen. I slipped into my formal uniform, taking extra care with my appearance. The black dress was simple but elegant, fitted at the waist before falling to just below my knees. I left my hair in its usual bun, but took more time ensuring it was neat and secure. Elena found me as I made my way to the foyer. "Look at you," she exclaimed. "You clean up nice." I smiled, grateful for her friendliness when so many of the other staff had remained distant. "So do you. Are you nervous?" "A little," she admitted. "Some of these guests are seriously powerful people. One wrong move and..." She drew a finger across her throat dramatically. "Don't even joke about that," I muttered, glancing around to make sure no one had overheard. She rolled her eyes. "Relax. I'm kidding. Mostly. She linked her arm through mine. Come on. Mrs. Petrovic will have our heads if we're late. The coat room was a converted study near the main entrance, large enough to accommodate hundreds of garments on the racks that had been installed for the occasion. Mrs. Petrovic ran through our duties with military precision, greet each guest, take their coat or wrap, provide a claim ticket, and arrange the items by number. Under no circumstances were we to enter the main party areas unless specifically requested by Mr. Volkov or his head of security. And remember, she finished, these guests value discretion above all else. You see nothing, you hear nothing, you say nothing. Clear? We all nodded our understanding. As she left, Elena nudged me. Did you see the security outside? It's like Fort Knox out there. I hadn't, but I wasn't surprised. Whatever the official purpose of this gathering, I was certain the real business conducted would not be entirely legal. The guests began arriving at 8. Men in impeccable suits escorting women dripping in jewels, their collective net worth probably equaling the GDP of a small country. Elena and I worked smoothly together, smiling politely as we accepted fur coats, cashmere wraps, and Italian leather jackets. Marcus checked claim tickets and managed the racks, ensuring everything remained organized. I had just finished helping an elderly woman with her mink stole when I felt it, that familiar shift in the atmosphere that signaled Alexei's presence. I turned to find him standing in the doorway, resplendent in a black tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. His dark hair was swept back from his forehead, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. He looked both dangerous and devastatingly handsome. His eyes found mine immediately, as if he'd known exactly where I would be. He nodded slightly, then turned to address Marcus. Everything running smoothly? Yes, sir, Marcus replied. No issues so far. Good. Alexei's gaze returned to me. Sophia, I need you to help me with something. Come with me. Elena's eyes widened, and I felt a blush creep up my neck as I followed Alexei out of the coat room. He led me through the bustling foyer, past servers carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and into a quiet hallway I knew led to his study. Is something wrong, sir? I asked, conscious of the curious glances following our progress. Alexei, he corrected quietly. And no, nothing's wrong. I just need your assistance for a moment. He opened the study door and gestured for me to enter. The room was warm and dimly lit, the walls lined with books and a fire crackling in the hearth. He closed the door behind us, and suddenly we were alone, the sounds of the party muffled to a distant hum. What do you need me to do? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Alexei moved to his desk and picked up a small velvet box. I need a woman's opinion, he said, opening it to reveal a stunning diamond bracelet. The stones caught the firelight, sending prisms of color dancing across the walls. Do you think this will impress Senator Harrison's wife? I understand it's her birthday next week. I stared at the bracelet, then at him, confusion washing over me. You brought me here to ask about jewelry? A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Is that so strange? You have a house full of elegant, sophisticated women who would be better qualified to judge, perhaps. He removed the bracelet from its box and held it out to me. Try it on. It wasn't a request. I extended my wrist, and he fastened the clasp around it, his fingers lingering on my pulse point. The diamonds were cool and heavy against my skin, impossibly beautiful and completely out of place with my modest uniform. Perfect, he murmured, but he wasn't looking at the bracelet. I withdrew my hand carefully, unfastening the clasp and returning the jewels to him. It's beautiful. Anyone would be impressed. He returned the bracelet to its box. Thank you for your opinion. But he made no move to return to the party, instead studying me with that intense gaze that seemed to see through every defense. Is there anything else you need, sir? Alexei? Yes, he said simply. I need you to understand something. My heart rate accelerated. What's that? He took a step closer. I don't bring staff to my private study for trivial matters. I don't request specific maids for my personal quarters, and I certainly don't notice the way a woman's uniform fits or how she looks in moonlight. The implications of his words hung in the air between us, undeniable now. Why me? I whispered. He reached out, his finger tracing the line of my collar just as he had that night in his sitting room. Because you see me, he said softly. Not the money or the power or the reputation. You look at me and you see a man. Before I could respond, a sharp knock came at the door. Alexei stepped back, his expression instantly reverting to cool professionalism. Enter. One of his security men opened the door, his face grim. Sir, Leonov has arrived. With company. Alexei's jaw tightened. I'll be right there. He turned back to me. Return to the coat room. We'll continue this conversation another time. I nodded, moving toward the door, but he caught my wrist. Sophia. His voice was low, meant only for me. Stay away from Leonov. If he approaches you, find Marcus or Elena immediately. The warning sent a chill down my spine. Who is he? Someone I don't trust, Alexei replied, releasing my wrist. Go now. I hurried back through the hallways, my mind racing with questions. What had just happened? Was Alexei Volkov, feared Mafia boss and untouchable billionaire, actually interested in me? And who was this Leonov that warranted such a specific warning? As I rounded the corner to the coat room, I nearly collided with a tall man in an expensive suit. He steadied me with hands on my shoulders, his grip too tight to be merely helpful. Careful, little one, he said in heavily accented English. You might hurt yourself running through hallways. I looked up into a face that might have been handsome, if not for the coldness in the pale blue eyes. Something about him raised every alarm bell in my body. I'm sorry, sir, I murmured, trying to step away, but his hands remained on my shoulders. Such a pretty little maid, he continued, his gaze traveling down my body in a way that made me feel naked. Are all of Volkov's staff so attractive? With sudden clarity, I knew exactly who this was. Leonov. And I had just walked right into his path. Excuse me, sir, I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I attempted to step around Leonov. I need to get back to my station. His grip tightened, one hand sliding from my shoulder to my upper arm. What's your hurry? He asked, his accent thickening. Perhaps you could help me find the coat room. It's just around the corner, I replied, gesturing with my free hand. I'm sure one of the security staff would be happy to escort you. Leonov smiled, but the expression never reached his eyes. They remained cold, assessing, like a predator sizing up potential prey. But I already have you, he said, his fingers digging into my flesh through the thin fabric of my uniform, and I think Alexei has been keeping his prettiest treasures hidden away. The way he said Alexei's name dripped with mockery and something darker. Hatred, perhaps. I remembered Alexei's warning and felt fear curl in my stomach. This man was dangerous in a way that went beyond the usual threat of the powerful. There was something unhinged in his gaze, something that suggested he didn't play by the same rules as the others. Mr. Leonov, a deep voice interrupted from behind me. I believe you're expected in the main ballroom. I nearly sagged with relief as one of Alexei's security men, Dmitri I thought his name was, appeared beside us, his face impassive, but his stance unmistakably protective as he positioned himself partially between Leonov and me. Leonov's grip loosened, but he didn't release me entirely. Ah, Dmitri, still Volkov's faithful dog, I see. His eyes flicked to me, then back to the security man. I was just getting acquainted with this charming member of the staff. Miss Reeves is needed elsewhere, Dmitri said flatly. If you'll follow me, Mr. Volkov is waiting to greet you personally. Something dangerous flashed in Leonov's eyes, but he finally released my arm, stepping back with exaggerated courtesy. Of course. We mustn't keep the great Alexei Volkov waiting. He looked at me once more, his gaze lingering uncomfortably. I'll see you later, Miss Reeves. The fact that he knew my name sent a chill through me. I hadn't introduced myself. He had clearly asked about me, or had been told about me. Neither possibility was comforting. Dmitri remained expressionless, but as Leonov turned to walk away, he placed himself firmly between us. Return to the coat room, he murmured to me. Stay there until the event concludes. I nodded, rubbing my arm where Leonov's fingers had dug in. There would be bruises tomorrow, I was certain. Thank you, I whispered. Dmitri gave a slight nod before following Leonov toward the ballroom. I hurried back to the coat room, where Elena pounced on me immediately. "What happened?" she demanded in a hushed voice. "Why did Mr. Volkov ask for you specifically? And why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" Marcus shot her a warning glance. "Not here," he muttered, nodding toward the doorway where guests were still arriving intermittently. I forced a smile and resumed my position, taking coats and distributing claim tickets with mechanical efficiency while my mind raced. The encounter with Leonov had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just his threatening manner or the possessive way he'd gripped my arm. It was the look in his eyes when Dmitri mentioned Alexei, pure hatred, barely contained. And then there was Alexei himself. His words in the study replayed in my mind. "Because you see me, not the money or the power or the reputation. You look at me and you see a man." What was I supposed to do with that? With the knowledge that one of the most dangerous men in the city looked at me and saw something worth pursuing? The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Guests came and went from the coat room, some already intoxicated, others engaged in hushed conversations that ceased abruptly when they noticed us. Elena tried several times to question me about my brief absence, but I deflected, claiming Alexei had merely wanted my assistance with an arrangement of flowers that wasn't to his liking. "Flowers?" Elena repeated skeptically. "He pulled you away from your duties for flowers?" I shrugged, keeping my eyes on the coat rack I was organizing. "You know how particular he is about everything." She clearly didn't believe me but didn't press further. Around midnight, the guests began to depart, and we were busy returning coats and wraps. I kept a wary eye out for Leonov, but to my relief, he didn't return to the coat room. By 2 a.m, the last guest had departed, and Mrs. Petrovich dismissed us with instructions to report for regular duty at noon the next day. "A small concession for your late night," she explained, which from her was practically a grand gesture of generosity. I walked with Elena back to the staff wing, both of us too tired to talk much. As we reached her door, she turned to me with concern in her eyes. "Be careful, Sophia," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" She glanced down the hallway to ensure we were alone. "I've worked here for 3 years. I've seen how it goes when Mr. Volkov takes an interest in someone." My heart skipped. "I don't know what you're talking about. Please," she scoffed gently. "The way he looks at you? The special assignments? It's obvious to anyone paying attention." She took my hands in hers. "I'm not judging you. God knows he's handsome and rich and powerful. But he's also dangerous, and not just in the obvious ways." I pulled my hands away, uncomfortable with her perception. "You're imagining things. Maybe." She didn't look convinced, but if I'm right, just remember that in his world, people are possessions, and he doesn't let go of what he considers his. She gave me a sad smile. "Good night, Sophia." "Good night," I murmured, continuing to my own room with her words echoing in my head. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, replaying every interaction with Alexei, every meaningful glance and careful touch. Was Elena right? Did he see me as just another acquisition? The idea should have repulsed me, yet I couldn't deny the thrill that ran through me whenever I thought of him, of the intensity in his gray eyes when he looked at me. I finally drifted off as dawn began to break, only to be awakened a few hours later by a soft knock at my door. Groggily, I pulled on a robe and opened it to find Mrs. Petrovich standing there, her expression even more pinched than usual. "Mr. Volkov wishes to see you in his study." Immediately. My stomach dropped. "Now, but it's only—" "Immediately," she repeated, her tone brooking no argument. "Dress appropriately." She left without further explanation. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. What could Alexei want at this hour? Had something happened at the party after I left? Was it related to Leonov? With shaking hands, I dressed in my regular uniform, taking care to look as professional as possible, despite my lack of sleep. I pinned my hair back neatly and splashed cold water on my face to dispel the last vestiges of drowsiness. The house was quiet as I made my way to Alexei's study, most of the staff still asleep after the late night. I knocked softly on the heavy oak door. "Enter." I pushed the door open to find Alexei standing by the window, still in his clothes from the night before, though his bow tie was undone and hung loosely around his neck. He looked tired, the hint of shadows beneath his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept at all. He was speaking rapidly in Russian into a cell phone, his voice low and intense. He gestured for me to sit while he finished his call. I perched on the edge of a leather armchair, trying not to fidget as I waited. Finally, he ended the call and turned to me, his expression grave. "Did Leonov approach you last night?" The abrupt question caught me off guard. "Yes," I admitted, "after I left you." But Dmitri intervened. Alexei's jaw tightened. "Did he touch you?" I hesitated, then nodded. He grabbed my arm. "It wasn't—" Before I could finish, Alexei was in front of me, kneeling to examine my arms. I wordlessly rolled up my sleeve to reveal the finger-shaped bruises forming on my upper arm. His expression darkened dangerously as he traced the marks with feather-light touch. "I should kill him for this alone," he murmured, almost to himself. A chill ran through me at the casual way he spoke of murder. "It's just a bruise," I said quickly. "It'll fade." His eyes met mine, and the coldness in them made me shrink back slightly. "That's not the point, Sophia." He marked what is mine. Elena's warning flashed in my mind. In his world, people are possessions. "I'm not yours," I said, the words barely a whisper. Alexei's expression softened slightly, his hand moving from my arm to cup my cheek. "Aren't you?" he asked quietly. "Haven't you been since the moment our eyes met in that hallway?" I couldn't deny the pull between us, the invisible thread that had been drawing us together since our first encounter, but I also couldn't ignore the danger inherent in what he was suggesting. "This can't happen," I said, my voice stronger now. "Whatever this is, it's impossible." "Why?" His thumb stroked my cheekbone, sending shivers down my spine. "Because of who I am, or because of who you believe yourself to be?" "Both," I admitted. And I'm just a maid?" He smiled slightly. "Do you think I care about that? About arbitrary distinctions of class or status? It's not arbitrary when one person has all the power." His smile faded. "You have more power than you know, Sophia. Especially over me." The intensity of his gaze made it hard to breathe. I stood abruptly, needing distance between us. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." He rose as well, but didn't follow as I retreated toward the door. "I know you're intelligent, observant, and far too good for the life you're living. I know you left nursing school not just for financial reasons, but because your father's gambling debts forced you to abandon your education to support your mother and younger sister." At my startled look, he continued, "Yes, I had you investigated. I know your father disappeared 2 years ago, leaving your family with nothing but creditors at the door. I know you work yourself to exhaustion to send money home each month." Anger flared at this invasion of privacy. "You had no right—" "I had every right," he interrupted calmly. "I need to know who enters my home, who has access to my private spaces." His expression softened again, but what I learned only confirmed what I already suspected. "You're extraordinary, Sophia. A fighter." My anger deflated, leaving confusion and a dangerous flicker of hope in its wake. "What do you want from me?" I asked quietly. "Everything," he said simply. "But I'll start with dinner." I blinked. "Dinner?" "Tonight, 8 o'clock. I'll have a dress sent to your room." His tone had shifted to businesslike, as if we were discussing a work assignment rather than a date. "I can't just— People will talk. Let them." He moved back to his desk, effectively dismissing me. 8 o'clock, Sophia. Don't be late." I stood frozen, torn between outrage at his presumption and an undeniable thrill at the prospect. "And if I say no?" He looked up, surprise flickering across his features before his customary control reasserted itself. "Then you say no. I'm not in the habit of forcing company on unwilling women." His eyes held mine. "But I don't think you will." He was right, damn him. Despite every logical argument against it, despite Elena's warning and my own misgivings, I knew I would be there at 8. "Is that all, sir?" I asked, deliberately formal. A small smile played at his lips. "For now, you may go." I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me at the door. "Sophia." I looked back to find his expression serious once more. Stay away from the east wing until further notice. And if you see Leonov again, anywhere on the grounds, you come directly to me. Understood?" The gravity in his tone sent a shiver of apprehension through me. "Yes, I understand." As I closed the door behind me, I leaned against the wall, my legs suddenly weak. What was I getting myself into, and why? Despite every warning signal flashing in my mind, was I so eager to dive deeper? The dress arrived mid-afternoon, a simple black sheath that looked modest until I tried it on. The fabric skimmed my curves in a way my uniform never did, making me look elegant and somehow vulnerable at the same time. Along with it came a pair of black heels and a small clutch. No jewelry, I noted with relief. At least he hadn't presumed to adorn me like a doll. I was just finishing my hair, loose for once, falling in soft waves to my shoulders, when a knock came at my door. I opened it to find Dmitri waiting in the hallway. "Mr. Volkov sent me to escort you," he said, his expression neutral as always. I nodded, grabbing the clutch and following him through the staff hallways and up a rarely used staircase that led directly to the east wing. He stopped at a door I had never entered. A private dining room, I realized, as he opened it for me. The space was intimate, lit by candles and a fire crackling in a marble hearth. A small table was set for two, crystal and silver gleaming in the soft light. And there was Alexei, rising from his chair as I entered. He wore a black suit, impeccably tailored, with no tie. The top buttons of his crisp white shirt were undone, revealing the hollow of his throat. He looked devastatingly handsome, and completely at ease, unlike me. "Thank you, Dmitri," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. The security man nodded and withdrew, closing the door behind him. For a long moment, Alexei simply looked at me, his gaze traveling from my face down the length of my body and back up again. "You're beautiful," he said finally. I felt my cheeks warm. "The dress helps." "No," he replied. "The dress is merely a frame. You're the masterpiece." He moved to pull out my chair. "Please sit." I did, hyper-aware of his proximity as he pushed the chair in. He returned to his own seat across from me, then lifted a bottle of wine from an ice bucket. "May I?" At my nod, he poured 2 glasses of pale gold liquid. "A Montrachet," he said, handing me one. "From a small vineyard in Burgundy. I think you'll enjoy it." I took a sip, surprised by the complex flavors that unfolded on my tongue, citrus and honey with a mineral undertone. "It's wonderful," I admitted. He smiled, pleased. "The first time I tasted this wine I was 22. In Paris with my father on business." A shadow crossed his face at the mention of his father. It was the last trip we took together before he died. The personal revelation surprised me. "I'm sorry about your father," he shrugged slightly. "It was a long time ago, but some lessons he taught me remain." He took a sip of his wine, his eyes thoughtful. "He always said you could tell a person's character by how they handled 3 things: power, money, and fear." "And how am I doing with those?" I asked, curious despite myself. "Power. You resist it, even as you're drawn to it. Money. You respect its necessity but don't worship it." His gaze intensified. "Fear. You face it, even when it would be easier to run." Before I could respond, the door opened and servers entered with the first course, a delicate soup that smelled of truffles and herbs. They worked silently, efficiently, avoiding eye contact with either of us. I realized with a start that they were not the regular kitchen staff, but professionals brought in specifically for this dinner. To avoid gossip, I assumed. Once we were alone again, Alexei continued as if there had been no interruption. "Tell me about nursing school. Why did you choose that path?" The question was so normal, so conventional for a dinner date, that it momentarily threw me. "My mother was a nurse," I explained. "I saw how she could calm people with just her presence, how she could ease suffering with knowledge and compassion." I traced the rim of my soup spoon, remembering I wanted to be able to do that too. "You will," Alexei said with unexpected gentleness. "When this is over, you'll return to your studies." I looked up, confused. "When what is over?" "Your time here." He gestured vaguely, "as my maid." "And what will I be instead?" I asked, unable to keep a hint of challenge from my voice. "Your mistress?" Instead of being offended, he laughed. A genuine sound that transformed his severe features. Is that what you think this is? An elaborate seduction to install you as my kept woman? Put that way. It did sound absurd. I felt my cheeks flush. I don't know what this is. His amusement faded, replaced by that intense focus that made me feel like the only person in his universe. This is me getting to know the woman who has occupied my thoughts for weeks. The woman who moves through my home like a guardian spirit, who sees everything but judges nothing. He reached across the table to take my hand. The woman I want in my life, not just my bed. My heart stuttered. You barely know me. I know what matters. His thumb stroked my palm. The rest, we'll learn together. The remainder of the dinner passed in a haze of exquisite food, candlelight, and conversation that flowed more easily than I would have believed possible. Alexei asked about my family, my childhood in a small town outside the city. My dreams before life had intervened. I found myself telling him things I'd never shared with anyone, about the night my father disappeared, about the crushing responsibility that fell on my shoulders at 22, about the guilt I carried for not being able to give my sister the life she deserved. In turn, he spoke of his own path, the son of a Russian immigrant who had built a business empire through means both legal and illegal, the weight of expectation that had rested on him since childhood, the isolation that came with his position. He didn't directly mention his criminal activities, but he didn't pretend to be something he wasn't either. You could have chosen a different path, I said as dessert was served, a delicate chocolate creation that melted on the tongue. You're clearly intelligent enough to succeed in any field. Could I? He considered this, swirling the last of his wine. Perhaps. But this world, my father's world, it's in my blood. And there's honor in it, despite what outsiders think. Honor in crime? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. He smiled slightly. In loyalty, in protecting those who depend on you, in keeping your word. His expression grew serious, the legal and illegal blur when you look closely enough, Sophia. Politicians take bribes and call them campaign contributions. Corporations exploit loopholes to avoid taxes while their workers struggle. At least in my world, the rules are clear. Break your word, betray your family, there are consequences. I could see his point, even if I didn't fully agree. And Leonov? Did he break the rules? Alexei's expression hardened. Leonov betrayed everyone who ever trusted him. He sold information to our enemies, resulting in the deaths of good men. He traffics in things even I won't touch, children specifically. His voice dropped, cold with controlled rage, and now he thinks he can walk back into this city, into my home, and act as if nothing happened. The vehemence in his tone made me shiver. Why did you invite him to the party then? Keep your friends close and your enemies closer, he quoted. I needed to see who still supports him, who he's aligned himself with. He reached for my hand again, but enough about Leonov. This evening is about us. As he said it, a clock somewhere in the house struck 10. I realized with surprise that we'd been talking for hours. I should go, I said reluctantly. It's late, and I have early duty tomorrow. No, you don't. At my questioning look, he explained. I've arranged for you to have different responsibilities going forward. Starting tomorrow, you'll be my personal assistant. I stared at him, caught between flattery and indignation. Don't I get a say in this? Of course, you can say no. His expression remained calm, but I sensed tension beneath. But the position comes with significantly higher pay, private quarters in the East Wing, and hours that would allow you to take evening classes at the local college, if you're interested in resuming your education. The offer was tempting, more than tempting. It would mean more money to send home, a chance to rebuild my future, and continued proximity to Alexei, but it also meant deeper entanglement in his dangerous world. What would my duties include? I asked cautiously. Managing my calendar, coordinating with my business associates, accompanying me to certain events. He traced a pattern on my palm, being near me. And that's all? Just professional duties? His eyes darkened. I won't lie and say I don't want more, Sophia. But that's your choice to make, not a condition of employment. I pulled my hand away gently. I need to think about it. Of course. He stood and came around to help me from my chair. Take tonight to consider. Let me know your decision in the morning." He walked me to the door, where Dmitri waited to escort me back to my room. At the threshold, Alexei raised my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that sent electricity racing up my arm. "Good night, Sophia," he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. "Sweet dreams." In my room, I paced the small space, trying to make sense of the evening, of the choices before me. The sensible part of me screamed that I should run as far and as fast as possible from Alexei Volkov and his dangerous world. But another part, a part I barely recognized, thrilled at his attention, at the possibilities he offered, at the way he looked at me as if I were precious and powerful all at once. I was still deliberating when a soft knock came at my door. Thinking it might be Elena wanting details of my evening, I opened it without checking first. A mistake I realized immediately when I found myself face to face with Leonov. "Hello again, Miss Reeves," he said with a smile that turned my blood to ice. "I believe we have unfinished business." Before I could scream, his hand shot out, pressing a cloth over my nose and mouth. I struggled, clawing at his arms, but darkness encroached on my vision with alarming speed. My last thought before consciousness fled was of Alexei and how he would react when he discovered I was gone. I woke to the smell of damp concrete and motor oil, my head throbbing with each heartbeat. Cold seeped into my bones from the hard floor beneath me, and my wrists burned where rope cut into the skin. For several disorienting moments, I kept my eyes closed, trying to piece together what had happened. Leonov. My room. A cloth over my face, and now... Where? Forcing my heavy eyelids open, I found myself in what appeared to be an abandoned garage or warehouse. Dim light filtered through dirt-streaked windows high above, illuminating bare concrete walls, rusted machinery, and a floor stained with oil and what looked disturbingly like old bloodstains. I was propped against a support column, my hands bound behind me around the cold metal. Finally awake, I see. The accented voice sent ice through my veins. Leonov stepped out of the shadows, no longer in his elegant party attire, but dressed casually in dark pants and a leather jacket. He looked more dangerous this way, more authentic somehow. The civilized veneer had been stripped away, revealing the predator beneath. "Why?" My voice came out as a rasp, my throat painfully dry. "What do you want with me?" He crouched before me, just out of kicking range, as if he'd done this many times before. "Nothing personal, I assure you," he said, his pale eyes assessing me coldly. "You're simply a means to an end, a way to draw out your beloved Alexei." Confusion mingled with my fear. I'm nobody to him, just a maid. Leonov's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Is that what you tell yourself? Perhaps that was true once, but I saw how he looked at you during the party, how he positioned his men to keep watch over you, his head tilted, studying me like a curious specimen. And then my sources tell me he arranged a private dinner for you. Quite the promotion from changing his sheets to warming them." Anger flared through me at his insinuation, momentarily overshadowing my fear. "You know nothing about my relationship with Alexei." "Alexei, is it?" His smile widened. "Not Mr. Volkov or Sir? How intimate you two have become." He reached out to touch my face, and I jerked away, banging my head against the column behind me. "What I know is that Volkov has finally revealed a weakness. You, and I intend to exploit it." "He won't come for me," I insisted, though a part of me desperately hoped otherwise. "I'm not important enough. We shall see." Leonov stood and pulled out a cell phone. "Let's find out how much you're worth to him, shall we?" He snapped a photo of me, bound, disheveled, a trickle of blood running from where I'd struck my head against the column. The flash momentarily blinded me, spots dancing in my vision as he turned away to make a call. He spoke rapidly in Russian, his tone casual, as if discussing dinner plans rather than a kidnapping. I caught Alexei's name several times, but nothing else I could understand. After a brief conversation, he ended the call and turned back to me with a satisfied expression. "Now we wait," he said, pulling up a metal folding chair and sitting across from me. "Though not for long, I think." Your Alexei sounded quite concerned. Terror gripped me at the thought of Alexei walking into this obvious trap. "Whatever is between you and Alexei, it has nothing to do with me. Let me go and deal with him directly." "And miss this opportunity? I think not." Leonov pulled a knife from his pocket and began cleaning under his fingernails with the tip, the casual menace of the gesture making my stomach clench. You see, Volkov has taken many things from me over the years. My business, my reputation, my place in the city. It seems only fair that I take something precious from him in return. The way he said precious made my skin crawl. He'll kill you for this, I said quietly. Leonov's eyes flicked to mine, something savage flashing in their pale depths. He can try. Many have. As you can see, I'm still here. Not for long, came a voice from the shadows, a voice I recognized instantly. Alexei stepped into the dim light, a gun held casually at his side. He looked like he'd dressed in haste. Black pants and a simple dark sweater, his hair slightly disheveled, but it was his eyes that made me shiver, cold and deadly as the barrel of the gun in his hand. Leonov spun around, his own weapon appearing as if by magic. But before he could aim, two more figures emerged from different corners of the warehouse, Dmitri and another of Alexei's security men, both with weapons trained on Leonov. "You're outnumbered, Victor," Alexei said, his voice eerily calm. "Put down the gun and step away from her." Leonov's laugh held a hint of madness. "Always so confident, Alexei, but did you really think I'd come alone?" He whistled, a sharp sound that echoed in the cavernous space. From the shadows emerged 4 armed men, their weapons trained on Alexei and his team. The odds had shifted dramatically, and I felt hope drain away as I realized we were now the ones outnumbered. "Seems we have a standoff," Leonov said with obvious satisfaction. "Though I have one advantage you don't." He moved behind me, pressing the barrel of his gun to my temple. The cold metal against my skin made me gasp. "You care whether this one lives or dies. I don't." The muscle in Alexei's jaw twitched, the only indication of his tension. His eyes met mine, and I saw something there I'd never witnessed before. Fear. Not for himself, but for me. "Let her go, Victor," Alexei said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "She's innocent in this. Your quarrel is with me." "Indeed it is," Leonov agreed. "Which is why you're going to order your men to drop their weapons and leave. Then you and I can discuss our differences." "Don't," I whispered, earning a painful jab of the gun against my head. "Silence," Leonov hissed. Alexei's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a subtle relaxing that seemed paradoxically more dangerous. "You know I can't do that, Victor, but I can offer you something better, a trade." Leonov's interest was clearly piqued. "What could you possibly offer that would be worth more than watching you suffer as I kill your woman?" "The account numbers," Alexei said simply. "All of them, including the ones in Zurich and Cayman." The gun at my temple wavered slightly. "You're bluffing. You'd never give up that much." "For her?" Alexei's eyes found mine again, something soft and fierce in them simultaneously. "I would." The naked emotion in his voice stunned me. This was more than attraction or possession. This was something deeper, something that defied the short time we'd known each other. Leonov seemed equally surprised, his breathing changing as he considered the offer. "The full accounts, access codes and all? Everything," Alexei confirmed. "In exchange for Sophia's freedom and safety. Guaranteed by your word, which, despite everything, I know you still value." A tense silence followed, broken only by the distant drip of water somewhere in the warehouse. I hardly dared breathe, afraid any movement might break the fragile negotiation. "How do I know this isn't a trick?" Leonov finally asked. "That you won't simply kill me once she's safe?" "You don't," Alexei admitted. "Just as I don't know you won't shoot her anyway. But we've known each other a long time, Victor. Whatever else has passed between us, we've never broken a direct promise to each other." Leonov was silent for another long moment. Then slowly, he lowered the gun from my temple. "A direct exchange. The woman for the account information. Everyone else stays where they are." Alexei nodded once, then turned to Dmitri. "Stand down. No one moves until Miss Reeves is safely out of the building." Dmitri looked like he wanted to protest, but kept his silence, lowering his weapon slightly without taking his eyes off Leonov's men. "Untie her," Alexei commanded. Leonov hesitated, then holstered his gun and crouched behind me. I felt the cold blade of a knife against my wrists, then the blessed relief as the ropes fell away. Blood rushed painfully back into my fingers as Leonov hauled me to my feet. "Walk to him," he ordered, giving me a slight push. Slowly. My legs trembled as I took my first step, then another. The distance between Alexei and me seemed impossibly vast, though it couldn't have been more than 20 feet. I focused on his face, on the intensity of his gaze that never left mine. Step by step, I moved toward him, expecting at any moment to feel a bullet in my back. When I was halfway across, Alexei spoke again. "The information is in my pocket. I'm reaching for it now." He moved slowly, telegraphing his actions as he withdrew a small USB drive from his pocket. "Everything you want is here." Leonov gestured for me to stop. "Toss it over." Alexei shook his head. "When she reaches me." "Half the information now then," Leonov countered, as a show of good faith. Without taking his eyes from mine, Alexei recited a string of numbers and letters. An account number and password, I realized. Leonov nodded to one of his men, who typed rapidly into a phone, then gave a confirming nod. "It checks out," the man said in a heavy accent. "Continue," Leonov instructed me. I resumed my careful progress toward Alexei. 3 more steps. 2. 1. And then his hand was on my arm, pulling me firmly behind him, his body a shield between me and danger. "Dmitri," Alexei said quietly. "Get her out." "No," I protested, grabbing Alexei's arm. "I'm not leaving you." His eyes softened for a fraction of a second as he looked down at me. "You must. This isn't your fight." He pressed a quick, hard kiss to my forehead, then handed me off to Dmitri, who began steering me toward a side exit. "The rest of the information," Leonov called after us. Alexei held up the USB drive. "As promised." The last thing I saw before Dmitri pushed me through the door was Alexei tossing the drive to Leonov, their eyes locked in a silent battle of wills that I feared would end in bloodshed. Outside, the night air hit my lungs like a shock, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. Dmitri moved me swiftly toward a waiting car, his grip on my arm firm but not painful. "We have to go back," I said frantically. "Leonov will kill him, Mr. Volkov can take care of himself," Dmitri replied, his voice confident despite the tension in his posture. "Our priority is getting you to safety." He opened the car door and practically pushed me inside. As he rounded the vehicle to the driver's side, I briefly considered making a run for it, back to the warehouse, back to Alexei. But before I could act on the impulse, Dmitri was in the driver's seat, starting the engine. "Please," I begged, as he pulled away from the curb. "We can't just leave him there." Dmitri's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "We're not." He tapped his ear, and I noticed for the first time the nearly invisible earpiece he wore. "Backup is already in position. Mr. Volkov was never alone." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by fear as the sound of gunfire erupted from the warehouse behind us. Dmitri accelerated sharply, taking a corner so fast that I was thrown against the door. "Are they?" I couldn't finish the question. "Focus on staying down," Dmitri instructed, his voice professional but not unkind. Mr. Volkov's orders were explicit. Get you to safety at all costs. I slid down in the seat as instructed, my body finally registering the pain from my ordeal. My aching head, my chafed wrists, muscles sore from being bound in one position. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the knot of fear in my stomach. If anything happened to Alexei because of me? We drove for what seemed like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, taking a circuitous route through the city, before pulling up to a building I didn't recognize, not the Blackwood estate, but a sleek high-rise in the most exclusive part of downtown. "Where are we?" I asked as Dmitri helped me from the car. "One of Mr. Volkov's private residences," he explained, leading me into the building where a security guard nodded respectfully. "The penthouse is secure and unknown to most of Mr. Volkov's associates. You'll be safe here until he returns." Until he returns, not if. I clung to that distinction as we rode the elevator to the top floor. Dmitri used a key card and then entered a code on a keypad beside an unmarked door. It swung open to reveal a stunning apartment, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city lights below. "Make yourself comfortable," Dmitri said, gesturing to the expansive living area. "There's food in the kitchen, clothes in the bedroom that should fit you." At my questioning look, he added, "Mr. Volkov made arrangements while we were tracking your location. He thought of everything." Of course he had. Even while orchestrating a rescue, Alexei Volkov remained 3 steps ahead, anticipating needs before they arose. "How did you find me so quickly?" I asked, sinking onto a soft leather sofa. Dmitri's expression remained neutral. "You have a tracker." "What? Where?" He nodded toward my wrist. "The bracelet Mr. Volkov gave you to try on earlier. It contained a microchip. When we realized you were missing, he activated it immediately." I stared at him, stunned. "He planted a tracker on me, without my knowledge?" "For your protection," Dmitri said, as if this were perfectly reasonable. "Mr. Volkov has many enemies. Anyone close to him is a potential target, as tonight demonstrated." Before I could process the implications of this, the invasion of privacy balanced against the fact that it had likely saved my life, Dmitri's earpiece crackled. He listened intently, then nodded. "Understood," he said to whoever was on the other end. To me, he added, "Stay here. I need to secure the perimeter." He disappeared into the hallway, leaving me alone with my whirling thoughts. I moved to the window, staring out at the glittering cityscape below, trying to calm my racing heart. Was Alexei alive? Had Leonov's men killed him? Had the backup Dmitri mentioned arrived in time? The minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. I explored the apartment, finding it minimally but expensively furnished. Clearly a safe house rather than a regular residence. In the master bedroom, I discovered a closet containing women's clothing in approximately my size, just as Dmitri had said. The thought of Alexei anticipating my needs, ordering clothes for me while simultaneously orchestrating my rescue, made my chest tight with emotion I couldn't quite name. I showered, washing away the grime and fear of the warehouse, and changed into soft leggings and an oversized sweater. The hot water helped ease the ache in my muscles, but nothing could quiet my mind or the growing fear that Alexei might not return. When I emerged from the bedroom, the apartment was still empty. I made my way to the kitchen and found it fully stocked. Though I had no appetite, I forced myself to eat a few crackers and cheese, knowing my body needed sustenance after the ordeal. I was just making a cup of tea when I heard the front door open. Dmitri's voice, then another, deeper, more familiar. I dropped the mug I was holding, barely registering the crash as it shattered on the floor. Alexei stood in the doorway to the kitchen, his clothes torn and blood-stained, a cut above his eye trickling blood down his temple. But he was alive, gloriously, wonderfully alive. "You're hurt," I whispered, unable to move. He shook his head slightly. "Not mine," he said, and I realized he meant the blood on his clothes. The cut on his forehead seemed to be his only injury. Leonov wasn't as fortunate. A chill ran through me. "Is he dead?" "No." Alexei's expression hardened. "But he won't trouble you again." Yet. The cold certainty in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it made me feel strangely safe, protected in a way I'd never experienced before. I stepped toward him, careful to avoid the broken ceramic scattered across the floor. "I thought you might not come back." His expression softened, the hardness melting away as his eyes met mine. "I will always come back to you, Sophia." The simple declaration broke something loose inside me. I crossed the remaining distance between us and threw myself into his arms. He caught me, his embrace tight enough to steal my breath, his face buried in my hair. "I was so afraid," I murmured against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath my cheek. When he took me, I thought, "Shh." His hand stroked my hair, gentle despite the strength I knew it possessed. "It's over. You're safe now." I pulled back slightly to look up at him. "Because of the tracker you put on me without my permission." A flicker of guilt crossed his features. "I should have told you, but I needed to know I could find you if—" I pressed a finger to his lips, silencing him. "It saved my life. I'm not angry." I hesitated, then added, "But in the future, I'd prefer you tell me these things." His eyes warmed at the implication of a future together. I promise. We stood there for a long moment, simply holding each other, the reality of what we'd survived slowly sinking in. Then Alexei stepped back slightly, his hands moving to cup my face. "I almost lost you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "When I saw you in that warehouse, with his gun to your head." He stopped, unable to continue. "But you found me," I reminded him. "You saved me." His thumb stroked my cheekbone. "At what cost, though? The accounts I gave Leonov, they give him access to significant power and resources. He's dangerous now in a new way." I frowned, confused. "Then why did you give them to him?" "Because there was no choice." Alexei's gaze was intense, burning with an emotion I was afraid to name. "I would burn every empire I've built to the ground if it meant keeping you safe." The words hung between us, weighted with meaning. This was no casual declaration, no simple attraction. This was something deeper, more profound, something that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. "Alexei," I whispered, not even sure what I wanted to say. He didn't give me the chance to find out. His lips descended on mine, gentle at first, then with growing urgency as I responded. I wound my arms around his neck, pressing closer, all rational thought fleeing as sensation took over. He tasted of danger and desire, of promises I wasn't sure either of us could keep, but in that moment, I didn't care. I was alive. He was alive. The rest could wait. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, Alexei rested his forehead against mine. "Stay with me," he murmured. "Not as my maid or my assistant, but as my partner, my equal." The offer stunned me. Equal? "Alexei, our worlds are so different." "They don't have to be." His hands moved to my waist. "I can protect you from the darker aspects of my business. You could finish your education, pursue your nursing career if that's still what you want. We could build something together, something legitimate." The sincerity in his voice made my heart ache. "You would change your life for me? A woman you've known for mere months? I would." No hesitation, no doubt, just absolute certainty. "You make me want to be better, Sophia. To build rather than destroy. To create a legacy that's more than power and fear." I searched his face, looking for any sign of deception or manipulation, but all I saw was raw honesty, vulnerability I suspected few had ever witnessed from Alexei Volkov. "I need time," I said finally. "Tonight has been overwhelming." Disappointment flickered in his eyes, but he nodded, releasing his hold on my waist. "Of course. I shouldn't have pressed you after everything you've been through." I caught his hand before he could withdraw completely. "I'm not saying no. I'm just asking for space to think clearly, to be sure that what I'm feeling is real and not just a reaction to trauma and rescue." Understanding dawned in his expression. "Take all the time you need. I'll have Dmitri take you wherever you want to go. Back to the estate, to a hotel, to your family, wherever you feel safe." The fact that he was willing to let me go, to give me the freedom to choose, told me more about his feelings than any passionate declaration could have. "I'd like to stay here tonight," I said softly. "If that's all right. I don't think I could bear to be alone right now." Relief washed over his features. "This place has 3 bedrooms. You can have whichever you prefer." He brushed a strand of hair from my face. "I'll be nearby if you need anything, but I won't intrude on your space." The consideration in the offer touched me deeply. This man, who commanded an empire built on intimidation and force, was treating me with a gentleness I hadn't known he possessed. "Thank you," I whispered. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, then stepped back. "Get some rest. We can talk more tomorrow." I nodded, suddenly exhausted now that the adrenaline was fading. As I turned to head back to the bedroom, Alexei's voice stopped me. "Sophia." I looked back to find his expression serious once more. "Whatever you decide about us, know that you'll always have my protection. Your family, too. I've already arranged for your mother and sister to be moved to a secure location, with funds to cover their needs and your sister's education." Tears sprang to my eyes at this unexpected generosity. "You did that? When?" "After our dinner, before," he gestured vaguely, indicating the chaos that had followed. "I wanted to give you peace of mind, Regardless of your decision about the assistant position, I was speechless, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd done. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to. His smile was gentle. Your happiness is thanks enough. As I laid in bed that night, in a room more luxurious than any I'd ever slept in before, I replayed the events of the day in my mind. The kidnapping, the terror of the warehouse, the moment Alexei appeared like an avenging angel to save me, his willingness to sacrifice his wealth for my safety, his kiss, searing with promise and possibility, his offer of a future together. It was too much to process, too overwhelming to make sense of in the aftermath of trauma. But one thing was becoming increasingly clear. As sleep finally claimed me, my life would never be the same. For better or worse, Alexei Volkov had woven himself into the fabric of my existence. And despite every logical argument against it, I didn't want him to let go. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment, disorientation gripped me as I stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, the events of the previous day rushing back in a dizzying flood. The kidnapping, the warehouse, Leonov's gun against my temple, Alexei's rescue, and his unexpected declaration. I sat up, wincing at the soreness in my muscles. The bruises on my wrists had darkened to purple, vivid reminders of how close I'd come to death. With trembling fingers, I traced the marks, trying to reconcile the quiet luxury surrounding me with the violence that had brought me here. The apartment was silent as I made my way to the kitchen, half expecting to find it empty. Instead, I discovered Alexei at the counter, dressed casually in a black sweater and jeans, making coffee. He looked up as I entered, his expression softening when our eyes met. "Good morning," he said, his voice gentle. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected," I admitted, suddenly self-conscious in the borrowed clothes, aware of my uncombed hair and bare face. "Thank you for everything." He nodded, handing me a steaming mug. Cream, no sugar, if I remembered correctly. The fact that he had noticed such a small detail touched me. Perfect. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, sipping our coffee, the domesticity of the scene at odds with the circumstances that had brought us here. Finally, Alexei spoke. "I have news." His tone was carefully neutral. Leonov was found dead this morning in his hotel room. Apparent suicide. I nearly dropped my mug. Suicide? But you said... I said he wouldn't trouble you again. Alexei's expression revealed nothing. I didn't specify how that would be ensured. A chill ran through me. Did you... No. He set his mug down, meeting my gaze directly, though I would have, without hesitation if necessary, but it seems Leonov knew his position was untenable after last night. The accounts I gave him? They were monitored. The moment he accessed them, his location was tracked, and evidence of his crimes was simultaneously sent to certain authorities. He chose the easier way out. The calculated precision of it stunned me. You planned this. All of it. Not your kidnapping, he said quickly. Never that. But once it happened. Yes, I saw an opportunity to end the Leonov problem permanently. I struggled to reconcile the man before me, gentle, considerate, making me coffee exactly as I liked it, with the ruthless strategist who had engineered a rival's destruction so completely. You're frightened of me now, Alexei observed, reading my expression with unnerving accuracy. You're wondering if you can love a man capable of such calculation. Love? The word escaped me in a whisper. His smile was sad. Is that not what we're discussing? What else would make a man like me offer to change his entire life? What else would make a woman like you consider staying with someone like me? The directness of the question stripped away any pretense. This was the crossroads, the moment of decision I'd asked for but wasn't sure I was ready to face. I don't know if what I feel is love, I said honestly. It's too new, too tangled up with fear and gratitude and other things. I met his gaze, but I do know that I can't stop thinking about you. That when I thought I might never see you again, it felt like the world was ending. That your touch makes me feel more alive than I've ever felt before. Alexei moved closer, not touching me yet, but near enough that I could feel the heat of his body. And does it frighten you? What you feel? Yes, I admitted, but not in the way you think. I'm not afraid of you, Alexei. I'm afraid of myself, of how completely I could lose myself in you, of what I might become to stay in your world. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You think I want to pull you into darkness, don't you? He shook his head. I want to follow you into light. The simple declaration stole my breath. Before I could respond, he continued, his voice low and intense. I meant what I said last night, Sophia. I want to build something legitimate, something lasting. I've been working toward that goal for years, moving investments into legal businesses, distancing myself from the more unsavory aspects of my father's empire. Leonov was one of the last connections to that old world. With him gone, you're free, I finished. Not entirely. There will always be shadows from my past, but free enough to choose a different path forward. His hand reached for mine, his thumb brushing over the bruises on my wrist with exquisite gentleness. With you, if you'll have me. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. This wasn't manipulation or seduction. This was a man laying his soul bare, offering a future I had never dared to imagine. I need to see it, I said finally. This legitimate life you're building. I need to know it's real before I can commit to anything. Relief flickered across his features. It wasn't a rejection. Of course. I'll show you everything. My businesses, my plans, my vision for the future. No secrets between us. No secrets. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. And my family, they'll really be safe? They already are. He squeezed my hand gently. I've purchased a house for them in a secure community outside the city. Your sister's tuition at the private academy is paid through graduation, and your mother has a position waiting for her at a prestigious hospital if she wants it. Tears stung my eyes. The burden I'd carried for so long, the desperate struggle to provide for my family after my father's desertion, lifted in an instant. Why would you do that for them? For me? Alexei's expression softened. Because they're part of you, and because I understand the weight of family obligation better than most. He hesitated, then added, My father's legacy was complicated, but he taught me one thing I've never forgotten. Protect what's yours with everything you have. Am I yours then? I asked. The question both challenge and surrender. His eyes darkened. That depends entirely on you. The moment stretched between us, heavy with possibility. Then, making my decision, I closed the distance between us, rising on my toes to press my lips to his. He responded immediately, his arms encircling me, drawing me against him as if he'd been starving for my touch. This kiss was different from our first. Not desperate with relief, but deliberate. A choice made with clear eyes and full understanding of what it meant. When we finally parted, both breathless, I saw something I'd never witnessed in Alexei's eyes before. Hope. Is that a yes? He asked, his voice rough. It's a beginning, I replied, my hand still resting on his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath my palms. I want to try, to see if we can build something real between us. His smile transformed his face, erasing years of hardness and calculation. That's all I ask. Over the next 6 months, Alexei kept every promise he'd made that morning. He showed me his legitimate businesses, restaurants, real estate developments, tech investments, all thriving and above board. He introduced me to his most trusted associates, men and women who ran the legal side of his empire with efficiency and integrity. And most surprisingly, he began the process of disentangling himself from the criminal enterprises that had made his family infamous. It wasn't a perfect transformation. There were heated arguments when I discovered connections he'd failed to sever, dangerous moments when enemies from his past resurfaced. But through it all, Alexei remained steadfast in his commitment to change, not just for me, but for himself, for the future he wanted to build. I returned to nursing school, finishing the degree I'd abandoned years before. Alexei insisted on paying my tuition despite my protests, arguing that my education was an investment in our shared future. I want you to have your own path, he told me, your own strength independent of mine. Our relationship evolved gradually, each of us learning to trust the other in deeper ways. I moved from the Blackwood estate to my own apartment, a gesture of independence Alexei respected, though he stayed with me more nights than not. We established boundaries and rules. No discussions of his remaining illegal operations in my presence, no involvement of my family in his business world, complete honesty about the dangers we might face. My mother was skeptical at first when I introduced Alexei as my partner. She had lived too long in the shadow of my father's poor choices to trust easily, but Alexei won her over with actions rather than words, ensuring her comfortable retirement, supporting my sister's dreams without fanfare or expectation of gratitude, showing up consistently for family dinners despite his demanding schedule. "He loves you," my mother said to me one evening as we washed dishes together after Alexei had left to take an urgent business call. "I recognize it because it's how your father looked at me in the beginning, before everything went wrong." Her comparison to my father had made me tense. "Alexei is nothing like him," she dried her hands, turning to face me fully. "No, he's not. Your father was weak. He ran when things got difficult." Her eyes were knowing. "Alexei Volkov may be many things, Sophia, but weak is not one of them. He would burn the world to keep you safe." Her words echoed what I already knew in my heart. Alexei's love was fierce, protective, all-consuming. Sometimes it frightened me with its intensity, but it was also steady, patient, giving me the space to find my own strength, even as it offered shelter when I needed it. On the anniversary of the night Leonov had kidnapped me, Alexei took me to dinner at a small, exclusive restaurant overlooking the river. He seemed unusually tense, checking his watch frequently, his eyes scanning the room with the hyper-vigilance that had never fully left him despite our increasingly normal life. "Is everything okay?" I asked, after he checked his phone for the third time in 10 minutes. He set the device aside, taking my hand across the table. "I'm sorry. Tonight is important and I want everything to be perfect." "It's just dinner," I said, though I suspected from his behavior that it was more. His smile was enigmatic. "Is it?" After dessert, he suggested a walk along the riverfront. The night was crisp and clear, stars visible despite the city lights. We strolled hand in hand, talking about nothing of consequence. My studies, his latest restaurant opening, a film we'd seen the previous weekend. Normal couple things that still felt miraculous given where we'd started. We reached a small, secluded gazebo overlooking the water, fairy lights twinkling in its eaves. Inside, to my surprise, was a small table holding a bottle of champagne in an ice bucket and a single red rose. "Alexei," I breathed, recognizing the setup for what it was. "What did you do?" He guided me inside, his expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. "I wanted this moment to be as perfect as you deserve." "What moment?" I asked, though my heart was already racing with anticipation. Instead of answering, he took both my hands in his. "1 year ago today, I almost lost you before I truly had you. It was the most terrifying night of my life, not because I feared death, but because I feared a world without you in it." Tears pricked my eyes at the raw emotion in his voice. "Before you," he continued, "my life was power and control, acquisition and defense. I measured success in territory gained and enemies defeated." His thumb stroked the backs of my hands. "You showed me a different kind of strength. The courage to be vulnerable, to love without possession, to build rather than dominate." He released one of my hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. My breath caught as he opened it to reveal a ring. Not the ostentatious diamond I might have expected, but a simpler, more elegant design. A deep blue sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds that caught the light like stars. "I chose sapphire because it reminds me of your eyes the first night we met," he said, his voice low, clear and deep and honest, "even when you were afraid." He sank to one knee before me, still holding my hand. "Sophia Reeves, you have transformed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've shown me that real power lies not in what we control, but in what we create together." His eyes never left mine. "Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, not as my possession, but as my partner, my equal, my heart?" Tears spilled freely down my cheeks now. The journey that had brought us here, from maid and master to equal partners, seemed impossible, miraculous, yet here we were, transformed by love and choice, and the daily decision to be better for each other. Yes, I whispered, then louder. Yes, Alexei. I'll marry you. Joy broke across his face like sunrise as he slid the ring onto my finger. He rose and pulled me into his arms, his kiss a promise of the future we would forge together. Later that night, as we lay tangled in the sheets of what was now our shared apartment, Alexei traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder. There's something else I need to tell you, he said, his voice serious enough to make me prop myself up on my elbow to see his face. What is it? I asked, suddenly concerned. I've decided to sell the Blackwood estate, he said. Too many shadows there. Too much of my father's legacy. I want us to start fresh, in a home that's truly ours, not haunted by the past. Relief flooded me. I'd like that. I've found a place, he continued. A house by the coast, modern but warm. Room for a family if that's what we want someday. His eyes searched mine. Would you like to see it tomorrow? A family. The word hung between us, filled with possibility. We'd discussed children only in theoretical terms before, both of us cautious about bringing innocence into a world that still held dangers from Alexei's past. You really believe we can have that? I asked softly. A normal life? Children, Sunday barbecues, and school plays? He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face. Not normal, perhaps. There will always be security considerations, precautions others don't have to take. But yes, I believe we can have a family, a home filled with love rather than fear. His expression grew serious. The last of my father's operations will be dismantled next month. After that, everything I own, everything I am, will stand in the light. The weight of this declaration, the final severance from his criminal past, struck me forcefully. Are you sure that's what you want? You've lived in that world your entire life. It's not what I want, he corrected gently. It's what I need. For you. For us. For the children we might have someday. His hand moved to my stomach, resting there with reverent care. I want our children to be proud of their father, to know him as a builder and protector, not a name whispered in fear. Tears welled in my eyes at the vision he painted, a future I hadn't dared to imagine when I first entered the Blackwood estate as a desperate maid, seeking any employment I could find. I love you, I whispered, the words still new enough to feel precious on my tongue. And I love you, he replied, drawing me close again, more than empire, or power, or life itself. As I drifted toward sleep in his arms, I marveled at the journey that had brought us here, from the cold marble foyer where I'd stood trembling in wet shoes, to this moment of perfect belonging. We had both been transformed. Me from a woman merely surviving to one thriving in her own power. Him from a man who commanded through fear to one who led through love. It hadn't been an easy path. There had been dangers and doubts, moments when the gulf between our worlds seemed too vast to bridge. But love, real love, had proven stronger than the shadows of the past. And in each other's arms, we had found not just passion or protection, but something far more rare and precious. The promise of redemption, the chance to become more together than we could ever be apart. 1 year later, I stood on the deck of our coastal home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. My nursing degree hung framed in my home office, where I split my time between hospital shifts and managing the charitable foundation Alexei and I had established to help families affected by domestic violence and financial hardship. The sound of the door sliding open behind me drew my attention. Alexei stepped out onto the deck, his expression softening as it always did when he looked at me. In his arms, he cradled our 3-month-old daughter, Natalia, named for his mother. She wouldn't settle, he explained, coming to stand beside me. I think she wanted to see the sunset. I smiled, taking in the sight of this powerful man so gentle with our tiny daughter. His business empire continued to thrive. Restaurants, tech investments, real estate, all legitimate now. A legacy he could proudly pass to our child someday if she wanted it. Like father, like daughter, I teased, leaning against his side. Neither of you can bear to miss a beautiful view. He pressed a kiss to my temple, his free arm wrapping around my waist. The most beautiful view is right here, he murmured. As the last rays of sunlight gilded the three of us in gold, I thought about the strange, winding path that had led us here. From a maid and a mafia boss to a family bound by love and choice rather than fear or possession. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were still occasional threats from Alexei's past that required vigilance, still moments when the darkness of his former life cast shadows across our present. But we faced them together, as equals, as partners, as the family we had built from the most unlikely of beginnings. "What are you thinking about?" Alexei asked. Noticing my contemplative mood, I smiled up at him, at the man who had once terrified me and now anchored my world, about how sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the darkest places, about how love transforms us when we let it. His eyes, once cold and calculating, now warm with devotion, met mine. About how a maid and a monster found redemption in each other. "You were never a monster," I corrected softly, reaching up to touch his cheek, "just a man who'd forgotten how to be anything else until love reminded you." He turned his face to kiss my palm, the gesture tender in its simplicity. "And you were never just a maid. You were always a queen without a crown. I just had the good fortune to recognize it before anyone else did." As night fell around us, stars emerging one by one in the darkening sky, our daughter sleeping peacefully between us, I knew with unshakable certainty that this was exactly where I belonged. Not in the shadows of Alexei's world, nor entirely separate from it, but in the life we had forged together. A life balanced between darkness and light, power and vulnerability, passion and peace. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was ours. And that made it the greatest love story I could have ever imagined.